In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint trees on plein air in 6 easy steps. I'm in the beautiful area of Northland, New Zealand in a place called Pakaraka, and I found this awesome spot at the side of the road to paint. So it's a beautiful afternoon here in northern New Zealand. It's autumn and I was just driving around looking for somewhere to paint. I want to paint some trees that are starting to show their autumn colours. And I found this view here as I was driving, so I've just immediately pulled over and I've just set up my painting gear, so I'm going to get started. I'm painting on an Alla Prima Pochard box easel made by Ben Haggett. If you want to get hold of any, I've got a link in the description box below. This is a 8x10 linen panel that's made by Seascape at canvaspanels.com if you want to get some of them. And the colours I'm using include titanium white, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium red light, alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue and phthalo green. These are oil paints made by Blue Ridge Oils. Again, if you want to get some, I've put a link in the description box below. So we're all set up, painting that down there. Let's get going. So step number 1, what we're going to do here is sketch out the composition on the canvas, and I'm sketching this out with burnt sienna mixed with liquid original, and that's the medium I'm using, which just helps to improve the flow of the paint and speed up the drying time. Now when I'm creating the composition, I want a nice dynamic composition, so the tree here is one of the main areas of interest in the painting. It's counterbalanced by this tree on the left, and then I've got the road that's also leading the eye towards the tree. Never have your focal area or area of interest in the middle of your painting, and don't have a centered horizon, as this will cause a displeasing static in your painting and it will ruin the composition. Now step number 2 is to paint the darks first. So what do I mean by this? I mean painting all the shadows in the scene first of all. So I started off here by painting the occlusion shadows in the tree, and then I'm painting the cloud shadows. Now clouds are often relatively light in value, but I include this in the darks anyway. Now whenever I paint, I always think in terms of value more than colour, and value is how light or dark your subject is. So why paint the dark values first? Well, by doing this it makes it much easier to paint the areas in light afterwards, especially when you're painting outdoors, because the light is always changing and one minute it might be sunny and the next minute it will cloud over. So by starting off by painting the dark values first, I can gauge it off the white of the canvas, so I know where my darkest darks are and my lightest lights. And then I can add all the mid-tones in the painting, and it creates a kind of framework that I can work to, and it allows me to mix the colours that I want and get the saturation of the colours correct. Now I'm painting the tree shadows here, and for this I used a mix of ultramarine blue with a little yellow ochre, so it gives the foliage here a green cast to it, and it's a pretty dark colour. Trees are some of the darkest values to be found in the landscape, whereas sky and clouds are some of the more lighter values to be found in the landscape, so that's something to think about. The ground planes or the grass are often quite light in value as well, except with the shadows. And then the slanting planes of the hills or the mountains are also reasonably dark in value. So it's a good way of remembering all the lights and darks in the scene that you're painting, especially when you're painting outdoors on plein air, because it's the values, the lights and the darks, that's what's going to create the realism in the painting and create the depth, make those distant landforms look like they're in the distance. Now what I'm doing here is I'm painting some of these tree stems, the branches, main stems, tree trunks, and they're also reasonably dark in value as well. And then next I painted the road. Now that all the main areas of darks are established in the painting, this leads on to step number 3, which is painting the areas in light. So here I was painting the areas in light in the tree canopy, and I was mainly using a mix of yellow ochre with some cadmium yellow, some ultramarine blue, so this formed my basic green mix, and then I added a little alizarin crimson, so a red element in the green that's just going to help to desaturate it. Then I adjusted the value of some titanium white, and I've even in places mixed a little bit of phthalo green just to create some emerald tones, especially in the grass, because I've used similar colours in the grass as to what I've used in the tree canopy. Now in the tree canopy itself, I used some more yellow ochre just because those leaves are starting to turn colour. It was autumn in New Zealand as I made this video. Now the greens in the trees are a little darker, as I said, because trees are some of the darkest values to be found in the landscape, and we need to make sure that the greens in the trees are darker so that it stands out against the grass. Now next I was adding a bit of contrast by painting some of the shadows, more of the shadows in the grass. At the time when I first blocked in the darks, I thought I would paint those areas in light, but then I felt that the painting needed more contrast, so I just added some more shadows to them. It's a very easy fix and easy to do. Now, as I said, the darks are established and I'm painting the areas in light, so now the goal is to just get the canvas covered, and then once that's done I can go back across the painting and start refining some areas, tidying up shapes and forms, and just adding a few details here and there. Now as this is a plein air painting, I want loose expressive brushwork in the painting itself. I don't want to get caught in the weeds with all the detail and things like that. In fact, having too much detail in your painting can start to take the life out of it and ruin the composition a little bit with too much information, in my opinion. I prefer more loose gestural painterly artworks, and they can still convey realism and detail. In fact, sometimes they often look more realistic than artworks that are painted with super fine detail. When you paint outdoors, you want to capture the essence and the feeling of the place that you're in, so you can take that painting back home with you and be able to look at it and just remember what you felt when you were looking at the landscape and painting it. This is what I love about plein air painting so much, and this is another reason why I use large brushes when I'm painting outdoors, so that I get more gestural brush marks. Now then, are you struggling with your painting? Is what you've imagined not turning out what you want on the canvas when you come to paint it? Perhaps you're struggling with tonal values and colour mixing, or composition, or all three of them. Well, let me help you with that. I'm giving away loads of free full-length landscape painting tutorial videos, including some videos on painting on plein air. It's all there to help you with your painting so that you can paint beautiful pictures. Just click the link below to get your free landscape painting tutorial videos. Back to the painting, and I'm now painting the highlights in the clouds, and this is mainly a mix of titanium white with a bit of burnt sienna, and I'm allowing some of the shadow mix from the clouds to mix in as well. So this leads to step 4, where I'm modelling and adding some details into the picture. Now, as I said before, I don't want to be overly detailed as this is a plein air painting, but I want to communicate realism but say what I want to say with fewer brush marks. I'm doing a bit of modelling here with the paint, just emphasising some of the forms, especially the clouds, and then the next thing I did was work on some of these trees. Now, in order to define the trees more, so define the shapes of the tree canopies, I was filling in the negative spaces around them, so I can use the cloud mix to do this, and also painting some sky holes as well. So this goes a long way to making your trees look realistic. For the cloud mix, I used ultramarine blue with burnt sienna, a little alizarin crimson, and titanium white, and this is a really useful colour mix for painting all sorts of things in landscapes. I painted the sky with a mix of titanium white, ultramarine blue and phthalo green, and then I moved back to the grass here in the foreground, just adding more texture just to communicate detail, even though it's loose brushwork. Now at this point in the painting I'm thinking about getting it finished, so I'm adding more layers of paint to the tree canopy, thicker layers of paint. I'm still using the same green mix I was using a moment ago, a mix of yellow ochre with cadmium yellow and ultramarine blue, a bit of titanium white, also some alizarin crimson, just to desaturate the green, the red in the alizarin crimson being opposite to green on the colour wheel. And generally I just want to communicate a relatively dense tree canopy. Now following this I start painting the suggestion of a network of branches within the tree itself, and then I tidy up the main tree stems here, and for this I'm using a mix of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, a little alizarin crimson and titanium white, so the same colours that I've used in the clouds, although the burnt sienna is a little bit more dominant in the mix. Now the painting as I say, is very near completion, so this leads to step number 5, where I restate the dark values in the scene overall. So this is re-emphasizing the shadows in the whole scene that I'm painting, especially in the trees. And the shadow mix here is ultramarine blue with a little yellow ochre. Once I restated the darks, this leads on to step number 6, and this is where I add the lightest values. So I save my lightest lights until the end of the painting. So in this case, the tree here, I'm painting the lightest values in the tree canopy. So this is where the direct sun is reflecting off the leaves. And I'm using the same colours that I was using a moment ago. I've just made the value lighter and increased the saturation slightly by adding a little more cadmium yellow. I can do the same here with the grass. I make the value a little bit lighter. And then I also add the lightest values in the clouds, and this is actually the lightest values in the whole painting, and this is just pure titanium white straight from the tube with just a little bit of yellow ochre. Now, in order to get the white to lay thickly across the canvas here without it mixing in too much with the colours underneath, you just gently brush the paint across the top of the existing layers. Don't use too much pressure, because if you do, it will start mixing in with the paint underneath. Now, as well as saving my lightest values until the end, I also add a few last little details, such as some of the highlights in these stems and branches in the tree, and I was using a really small number 0 synthetic rigger brush. And then I just finish up the painting by just tidying up areas. So now I'll just summarise the steps in this plein air painting. So the first step was to sketch out the composition on my canvas. Then the next thing I did, step 2, was to paint all the dark values and shadows first, because this makes it easy to paint the areas in light, which leads to step 3, which is painting all the areas in light afterwards. Step 4 was when I started doing the modelling stage and the details. Step 5 was when I restated the dark values, and step 6 was saving my lightest values until the end of the painting. And here it is, the finished painting. I managed to get it done just before the sunset. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to get your free landscape painting tutorials by clicking the link below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.